So back in the late 90s, very soon after I first got into DJing, I saw a DJ scratching live in front of me for the first time ever. And it completely blew me away. And I decided then and there that that was something that I needed to learn how to do. And 5 years later, I won the UK DMC final in 2004. If you're interested in learning how to scratch, then stick around because this video is for you. I'm going to share the tips and tricks that helped me quickly learn back then. And I'm going to help make sure that you avoid the same mistakes that I made. By the end of this video, you will go from complete beginner at scratching to having 2 brand new scratch techniques that you can use in your DJ sets. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing to note is that you can learn to scratch on any DJ gear that you have. Whether it's a DDJ Flex 4, a DDJ Flex 2, a Hercules Starlight, or a full Pioneer DJ CDJ setup. No matter what equipment you've got, you will be able to learn what I teach you in this video. So right here, I'm using the DDJ Groove 6, which is a new controller from Alpha Theta, and I'm going to be using this with Serato, but this controller also works with Rekordbox. Now the first thing that we need to do is get some scratch sounds into Serato. So right here, I've got Serato open, and this is what Serato looks like. It's completely blank. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the new crate icon, and then double click this new crate and call it Scratch Sounds. Now, I actually have my own scratch tool that contains my 5 favorite scratch sounds. If you need that and you would like to download it for free, then just hit up the link in the description. And then once you've downloaded it, open up your Finder on your computer and then drag that into your scratch sounds crate. So now we've got our very first crate inside Serato. This works exactly the same in Rekordbox. You can either make a new playlist or you could just drag the scratch samples file straight onto a deck in Rekordbox from your Finder. So now let's load that into a deck by dragging it onto the left deck. And now let's press play and take a listen to the sounds. So that's the first sound, very classic scratch sound. Sample number 2, sample number 3, sample number 4. Now sample number 4 is the same as sample number 1, but it's been slowed down and EQ'd. And I actually much prefer this scratch sound to scratch sound number 1. And then finally, scratch sound number 5 is just a continuous tone. And I'm going to show you later on in this video why that tone is so useful. I already have hot cues set on all of these sounds. But if you don't have hot cues set, then feel free to set a hot cue at the very start of each sound. To do that, just move the playhead position to exactly where you want it and then press one of the empty hot cue slots right here. And then one last thing that we need to do before we can start scratching is make sure the crossfader settings are set correctly. Here in Serato, just go to the settings icon, and then under the mixer tab, you'll see the crossfader settings right here. Just make sure that this dial is set all the way to fast. That way, when we move the crossfader from one side to the other, the sound will cut in very, very quickly. Take a listen. We only have to move the crossfader a very, very tiny amount before the sound turns on. This is exactly what we want for scratching. If we have this set all the way to slow, then the crossfader will act like a volume control. Take a look. That is no good. We need a very sharp cut in, so just make sure that this is set to fast. In Rekordbox, you can find this setting right here. Okay, so now we're ready to start scratching. Now the first thing that we need to make sure we get right is our hand placement on the jog wheel. If you're just starting out learning and you don't place your hand in the correct position, then you're just going to make things harder for yourself as you start learning. So let's make sure we get this right. So let's press play on the deck. This is the first sound, and then let's put our hand on the jog wheel and bring the sound back. And what we're aiming for is we're aiming to get the very top of the sound, which is right there, and we want our hand to be around the 9 o'clock position. This is a very good rule of thumb for any scratch technique that you go on to learn. Making sure that your hand is placed correctly on the jog wheel is very important. So spend some time practicing putting your hand around this position here at the very top of the sound every time you practice your scratching. Now the first scratch technique that we're going to learn is called the drop scratch. And it's one of the first scratch techniques that any DJ will learn, but it's also one of the most important to get right. So whereas the baby scratch is simply keeping your hand on the jog wheel and moving the sound backwards and forwards, To perform the drop scratch, you do a very similar thing, except you let go of the jog wheel to let the sound play, and then you bring the sound back to the beginning. It's very important at this early stage of learning to scratch that you keep your hands as relaxed as possible. I've taught many people to scratch over the years, and one of the most common issues I find is people's hands really tense up. You really want to have a nice relaxed feeling in your hands. This is going to make all of the more difficult scratch techniques far easier to learn. So here's the drop scratch. You let go of the jog wheel to let the sound play. Put your hand around here and then bring the sound back to the start of that sound, and then repeat. Let go of the jog wheel. Stop it around here. Pull it back to around here. And just drill this movement. The reason this is such a foundational and important scratch technique when you're first starting out is it teaches you to control the jog wheel. It gives you an idea of how much you need to pull the sound back after the sound has played. So once you've got the hang of what the drop scratch is, I recommend drilling it over and over again. And when you feel really comfortable doing it, feel free to speed it up. If you find that that's too fast, then just slow it down. The key here is you always want to bring the sound back to the very top of the sound. With enough drilling and practice, this will become second nature and quite easy to do. And by the way, if you're finding this video useful and you'd like to take your learning even further, then I will send you some completely free scratch lessons straight to your email. Just hit up the link in the description. So once you feel comfortable performing the drop scratch, then I recommend moving on to the second scratch technique in this video, which is transformer tone clicks. Now, some of you may have heard of the transformer scratch before. The transformer scratch involves turning the crossfader off and on rapidly like this. But before you start learning the transformer scratch, it's very important to actually get used to and understand what your crossfader hand needs to do. So right now, we're not actually going to be touching the jog wheel at all to learn this scratch. We're just going to be focusing on the crossfader. So if we press play on the continuous tone at the end of the scratch samples file, it will sound like this. So that's a continuous tone that we can practice our crossfader clicks with. Now, because we've already set the crossfader up to have a very sharp cut in, if we turn the crossfader on slightly by moving the crossfader over to this side a small amount, you can hear that the tone cuts in very, very quickly. This is perfect. I'm also going to be playing a hip hop instrumental on deck 2 so that we can practice our transformer tone clicks in rhythm to a beat. So let's press play on both decks. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my thumb on this side of the crossfader, and I'm going to use my index finger and my middle finger to turn the crossfader on and then off very quickly. And what I'm doing is I'm using my thumb to very gently push back the crossfader so that the default position of the crossfader is always turned off. So thumb on the crossfader, and then use these two fingers to turn it on. This is just the click, the fader click motion of the transformer scratch. And the reason it's important to learn this before learning the transformer scratch is that this crossfader movement is most likely brand new to you, and it's such an important and critical part of learning to scratch. So now let's press play on both decks again, and I'm going to gradually increase the speed of my fader tone clicks. If you find going fast with those fader clicks quite difficult, then don't worry, just stick to the slow ones to get used to the hand movements and the fader movements, and just build up that muscle memory before you start to go faster. It's also very important to change the rhythm of your tone clicks and not just stick to a static pattern. Okay, so once you feel comfortable with those fader clicks, that's when you can start to introduce some movement on the jog wheel at the same time. Now this really takes the difficulty up a notch because you're doing two different things with both of your hands. It's kind of like drumming. At first, learning that new coordination can be really tricky, but I'm going to show you how you can avoid mistakes and learn quicker. So now let's press play again on both decks, and I'm going to do some continuous fader clicks in time with this beat. So with this technique that I'm about to teach you, the fader click movement doesn't change. So what we're doing with this hand does not change at all. But this is the jog wheel movement that we're going to introduce. So let's break that technique down. And then you can speed it up. So as you can see, the crossfader hand doesn't change at all. The pattern of the crossfader movement stays exactly the same. So as we let the sound play for 2 fader clicks, we then put our hand on the jog wheel and bring the sound backwards for the exact same amount of time. So what you're actually doing with your hand on the jog wheel is you're mirroring the reverse sound to the forward sound. The best thing to do when learning any new scratch technique is start slow, and then as you build confidence with that technique, you can build up the speed. So always start learning your scratch technique slow to get the rhythm and the timing down, and then you can start to speed it up. Another technique that's really helped me when learning new scratch techniques is to practice in short but intense bursts. Always try and make sure that your practice is super focused and free of distractions. You're much better off practicing for a short amount of time with focus and intensity than for a long time when you're only half paying attention. So if you've been practicing intensely for a short amount of time, feel free to just walk away and you'll actually find that you learn quicker. Once you feel confident with those transform scratch patterns, then you can start coming up with your own rhythms and patterns. And this is actually the fun part of scratching. When it comes to scratching, this is only the beginning. There is so much more to learn, and that is why I created my ultimate scratching course. It's got over 80 videos with every scratch technique that you will ever need to learn, plus a beat juggling masterclass, tips on how to practice, and each scratch technique has its own Q&A session where you can practice your new scratch techniques alongside me in real time. If you'd like to find out more, then just click the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video useful and you'd like to check out more from my channel, then YouTube recommends this video right here.